talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes,
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuits!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary Dog!
Pearson and Blurnsville.
Futurama.
Good evening, all my quarantine fellows and fellettes. This is the Radulich and Broadcasting Network Premier Podcast TV Party tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show, so they tell me, is Aggretsuko. Brought to you by the good people at FanWorks and Netflix. Aggretsuko, also known as Aggretsuko, is a Japanese anime musical comedy based on the character created by Yeti for the mascot company Sanrio, who's also responsible for Hello Kitty. The character first appeared in a series of animated shorts by FanWorks, which aired on the Tokyo Broadcasting System television between April 2016 and March 2018. A original net animation adaptation was launched on Netflix in April of 2018, and the second season premiered June 2019. It is set for a third season. There's also a comic book, which when the third season comes out, we'll maybe talk about the comic book as well. Now, you might be wondering, if you've been following the Radulich and Broadcasting Network TV Party podcast for a while, like, this doesn't necessarily seem like something they would talk about. Well, contrary to popular opinion, I am not a dictator, and, and occasionally, you know, Robert Winfrey or Jesse Starcher will pitch like a Black Mirror or BoJack Horseman or something. Somebody will pitch me and say, hey, I'm really passionate about this TV show or this movie. I think you should watch it and we should talk about it. Or this is something I think you would enjoy. Or this is the thing I want to talk about with you. I want to get your opinion on it. And that brings us to our first guest tonight from our Canadian office, David Wright. How do you do, sir?
I'm doing good, thanks. Still alive, still home, forever.
Now, you're responsible for this mess. You talked me into doing this. I don't remember why or how, but I'm going to turn the conch shell over to you and kind of explain to me why you pitched me on this show and wanted to talk about it tonight.
Okay, first of all, listeners, the conversation was like, hey, I'd be up for doing Aggretsuko, and Mark was, okay, I can get you in on the 14th. So, you know, sure twisted his arm.
I say yes to everything. I'm a whore for content. But how did you get to that point? Because you could have said, hey, I'm up for discussing porn, and I would have said yes too. But you didn't say porn, you said Aggretsuko. So why?
Why has nobody ever said porn? Why has that never been suggested up to this point?
Hang on, everyone. That's Sean Comer from On Trial and Long Road to Ruin. Hi, Sean.
Hi, everybody.
Perfect. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I think Winfrey's now like making a list of stuff after that statement.
He's been making a list.
Not the porn statement. The one before that about up for anything.
Yeah, he's been making a statement. He's making a list and checking it twice for a while now.
Okay. I was going to say, Mark, if you are listening and you are indeed doing that, I want you to put this in all caps, highlighted, triple underline, wet dream on Elm Street.
Speaking of which, Robert Winfrey, when I said, stop bitching and complaining about me not doing things you want to do, what do you want to do? And immediately threw out the Babadook. So we'll be doing that in October.
Fuck yes, we're doing the Babadook. Yes.
Super.
Oh, yes, we are. And yes, you are putting me on that show, goddammit.
Great. Can't wait for October. David, third try. Aggretsuko, okay. Go.
Okay. Yeah, so how the heck did we end up here? It's like, well, so like my wife's Japanese, so I'm always on the lookout for anything on Netflix with Japanese subtitles or audio with English subtitles. So, you know, we have something we can watch together. So I came up and I didn't really think much of it, and then I kind of like read the summary. And it's like, okay, cute little red panda working at an office who drowns her sorrows by singing death metal karaoke. It's like, okay, that's worth a look. And so yeah, that got me interested, and I just found like it's just really good sort of workplace comedy about just kind of growing up and getting into the industry or getting into like a career industry sort of thing, and then like it had the death metal segment of it. And I was like, you know what, this would actually probably be pretty fun to podcast about. And then people kept on posting Aggretsuko memes in our group chat. So
they did.
Well, I mean, this all started off when Alexis posted like a Aggretsuko meme-ish thing, and like, oh hey, Aggretsuko, we should try that.
Because of course she did.
My wife asked me, like, I was watching this on one of the days I had off recently, and she's like, "What is this?" I'm like, as near as I can tell, it's The Office / Ally McBeal with Hello Kitty. That's the best description of this that I could come up with.
You know what? You are not wrong.
Thank you.
You are not wrong.
So that brings us over to you, Sean. Now, we said we were doing Aggretsuko, and like 900 people in our Radulich and Broadcasting announcements chat like tripped over themselves, knocked over the pots and pans, elbowed a small child, and all said, "Hey, I want to be included." Most of those people are not here. But you, sir, you, sir, were one of those people who were like, "You're doing what now?" So how did you find this, and what makes you so passionate about it?
You know what? Entirely by accident. One day, I mean, for a little background, I mean, this is kind of in the same vein of context as David's wife being Japanese, possibly. I lived for a while I was kind of getting my life together after everything that happened in my life over the last 3 years happened. I was living in West Plains, Missouri, with my folks for a little bit, and kind of getting the pieces in place to move out. I don't know if you've ever been to West Plains, Missouri. It makes Wyoming look like sandals, to give you just an idea of just how much there is to do there. It makes Montana look like Montego fucking Bay. And a day just kind of came when I was out of stuff to watch. Despite having a massive PS4 library, there was nothing that I really wanted to play and also had time to play. And I just kind of needed something fresh, a palate cleanser. And as I was scrolling through, I'd heard of it very vaguely. I didn't have a clue what it was about. I just knew that my Twitter timeline and my Facebook had been blowing up with people who were absolutely slobbering over this Netflix anime called Aggretsuko. And I watched the trailer, and I saw adorable death metal panda. Why the fuck would I not watch that? And at first I was just thinking, like a lot of other shows that I've watched over the years, it was going to be something that would just have a kind of quirky, I want to sit through it just to say I sat through it kind of appeal. And yet, after the first episode, I was kind of blown away by how much kind of introspective maturity meets a genuinely adorable, adorkable, lovable, and yet curiously relatable cast. And that's always been the thing about the Japanese media that I've been exposed to over the last few years as I've dove more into it. That's the thing that's always appealed to me so much about it, is the fact that it can take something really thoughtful and introspective, or even kind of something downright existential, and it kind of chases it with just that right spoonful of either insipid or flat out weird sugar that helps it go down so much more smoothly and makes it so much more memorable and really makes you feel better for having just witnessed the whole thing. And the comparison was made to The Office, and that's certainly very valid. I found myself enjoying the first two seasons as much as I did the second and third seasons of the U.S. rehash of The Office, which I think were the two best ones, just my opinion. And it's become, I don't even want to call it a guilty pleasure, because that feels almost like I'm kind of dismissing it or dumbing down its appeal, or just how good the show really is. But fuck the guilty part. I just unabashedly love this wacky, weird little 10-episode slice of life.
So, this is not, generally speaking, in my wheelhouse, but I will say this: I had some loud laughs at this at times, because you have like that workplace comedy feel to it, sitcom, and then and it's all the. And if you've seen kind of one workplace comedy, you've seen a lot of them. There's always like I've never watched The Office, but I've certainly seen Office Space. You've got the Bloomberg type of boss, and the dissatisfied sort of drone workers, and sort of trying to find a way to survive it all, that kind of a thing, and therein lies the tension. And so I was getting that, and I was like, okay, is that what this is? When it switched to her doing karaoke, it isn't even just the death metal, deathcore screaming, which was funny in and of itself to me, the contrast of this adorable red panda suddenly going, ape shit. I would actually, key into the lyrics that she was belting out.
Yep.
And I would die laughing. Generally speaking, those were my favorite parts of the episode. Let me go over to you, David. So this first 10 episodes-ish, 9-10 episodes that came out in April of 2018, mostly deal with her and her boss, Ton.
Yep, boss Ton. Ton
And
Bucho.
The setup is she graduates from school, and she's got high hopes and big dreams, and she shatters her ankle, and she ends up working for this trading company for 5 years, and that's where we find her. And she's just utterly dissatisfied, and she's got a bully boss, and she's got coworkers who are backstabby. So that's kind of where we are with most of this season, is her dealing with that, and we'll talk a little bit about the transitions that happen. But the setups here, the first part of the season, the introduction of the boss and the turmoil that she goes through. What did you think of all that?
I think the last time I was on here, we sort of talked about mature shows or movies, and just sort of how a lot of that time just means grim, dark, lots of sex, violence, and that sort of thing, and that's considered to be mature. Whereas I would actually think it's more in terms of the content of the story and the characters. And the thing with Aggretsuko is, even though you look at it's all these cute little Sanrio characters, it's a very pink show. What in the world would any straight male over the age of 30 ever see in this thing? But I think it's actually it is a very sort of mature show. Kids would not like this show.
No. I think I asked that initially. You guys pitched it, and I went to go look at it. I'm like, oh, this is Hello Kitty characters. I'm like, I could watch this with my daughter, and they were like, no, no. Yeah, they wouldn't get this. Their lives aren't utterly disillusioned.
But yeah, it kicks off at the point where Retsuko, she's been working for a few years, and she's kind of just stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
She's not really getting anywhere. Nothing's super terrible, but nothing's great either, and it's just kind of this, what am I doing with my life section of her life, basically.
She's bored with treading water, but not really sure what shore she wants to swim toward.
Yeah, and she probably doesn't really have a sort of career goal other than to just kind of have a career, just work, which is she got out of college or high school, and she just probably shopped resumes around and got hired by a company, and that's where she works now.
And I think that's a highly relatable point that many people You go to college because you're supposed to, and you go and you get a job because you're supposed to, and you start to amass property and things, and those things need to be paid for, so you keep working. And, I've met, in the field of social work, I have met a lot of people who are passionate. That is a career field that, draws people who are passionate about it. But on the other side of that, I have definitely been around people who are like, yeah, man, this is just my job. It's just a place I go that pays me so that I can go do other stuff that I actually enjoy. And that's kind of what we get from her is like, yep, here I am. I'm doing a thing because things cost money. Right, Sean?
To a certain extent. I mean, the two things that stuck out the most for me about this show. And I'm going to preface number one by saying that I do not have the kind of extensive sort of up close experience with Japanese culture that David has been fortunate enough to have.
You say fortunate. Actually, it's pretty good for the most part.
Hear me out. Hear me out. So this just comes specifically from my just impressions of Japanese culture from the media that I've kind of dove into over the past couple of years as my own relationship has brought me kind of into more touch with it. There's kind of this very unique philosophy that kind of permeates all creative things to come out of Japan in terms of the identity that, we are happy to absorb other cultures' media and traditions and to respect them and to sometimes put our own spin on them. And we welcome others embracing our culture. But make no mistake, we are our own people. We do our own thing. There's really scarcely a fuck to give whether any of you get it or like it or not. And that kind of goes for just about everything Japan does. I don't know if some of that just kind of comes from being this Asian kind of band of islands that for years was really very, very isolated and kind of preferred to keep things that way. But for whatever reason, that is what it is. They do their own thing. You're welcome to check it out and appreciate it, but make no mistake, international consumers, your opinion of it is really pretty incidental for the most part. Whatever you might think of it, with a very few exceptions. I mean, I've heard it said that professional wrestling is one of the few truly original art forms to ever come out of America. Well, Japan took that and they made it their own. And what they've made of it, they couldn't care less what the West thinks of their wrestling traditions. And you could kind of, to a certain extent, say the same thing about everything from their food to their video games to their manga, their anime, what have you. And it's one of those things that, ironically enough, I think that Netflix really doesn't understand is the appeal of so much Japanese media, and that's just how very Japanese it all is. It's why the remake of Death Note was so unforgivably terrible, is because if you've ever read the manga or seen the anime, it is such a Japanese story. And they took it and they tried to westernize it, and it just wasn't even anything even remotely close to the same. It's not like America taking another Anglo culture sitcom or their game show and making their own spin on it, because there's still that kind of relatable Anglo thread about it. And so much of Japanese culture and Japanese norms and traditions couldn't possibly be much more divorced from, Western civilization as we know it today. So that was the first thing that stood out to me. And the other thing about it is in terms of its relatability, and Mark, you and I talked about this, is, yeah, there are definitely tropes and threads and ideas that are universal that anybody would be able to kind of pick up on, but I think that, as David kind of joked about, or I forget whether it's David or Mark that joked about this a second ago, if you're a straight male that's watching this, there are certain parts where you should maybe cut, where it's maybe kind of easier to watch and from a sense of empathy and maybe trying to better understand more than saying, oh yeah, I totally get it. Because the whole idea is Retsuko isn't just stuck in the general loop where she's going, well, this is my job, this is my life, it is what it is, whether I know what it is or not. It's the idea that as a woman in this culture, she has so much less perceived she's perceived as having so much less freedom and so many fewer avenues for herself, for a woman of her age and her skill, such that the two options are seemingly, you will either work here until you're a husk, until you're pretty much used up, or your only other option is you kind of marry your way out of this and make babies. Like, those are the two practical avenues for you. That is what you're stuck with. And, you know, Boss, forgive me if I mispronounce it. On the show it's always pronounced Tone, but I'll take David's word for it that it's Ton. Boss Ton looks upon her as being wholly expendable, insubordinate, and unrealistic, I think, at first, but then later kind of comes to respect her backbone a little bit, even if it's kind of grudgingly in terms of her capacity to stick up for herself. And I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
Oh, yeah, no. Finish your thought.
Yeah. But it's something that it's really difficult, if not almost impossible, for, in particular, a cis-het white male to really look at and understand entirely. As someone who, based on any of those factors, is rarely, if ever, going to find themselves truly kind of marginalized, pigeonholed, and dismissed as Retsuko kind of is. So it's maybe best to look at it with, I think, kind of an open mind toward seeing what for at least one woman friend of mine was, she said, very relatable as a woman who lives in Florida, in Miami, and is in her early 20s, works an office job where I can attest she indeed feels constantly put upon, underappreciated, but in the big picture with kind of few clear paths as to where she goes from here. And kind of after she pointed that out to me, I kind of went back and I rewatched the first season, and it was amazing to me how even Retsuko's tone of voice and some of her mannerisms kind of reminded me of Saki a little bit.
David, you wanted to jump in there?
Sure, there's a lot to unpack there, but first, and this isn't me firing shots at anyone in particular, but be very careful, like, falling into the trap of watching media from another culture or country and starting to think that you have an understanding of that culture or country. Like, I lived in Japan for 7 years, and,
Yeah.
there's probably some things that I have a better grasp on than someone who has not done that. But, I'll still say that there's, lots of stuff there that I don't quite get, and that's all fine. But, anime in general is a very sort of specific export that doesn't really give you necessarily an accurate view of the country.
What about hentai? Does that?
I don't think I am qualified to answer that.
Well, and David, I want to stress, I meant no disrespect.
Exactly. That wasn't meant for you personally. It was just kind of in general, because there are the armchair experts out there.
Oh, no, and I don't mean to give that impression that I definitely know anything. I said, it was just kind of, it's been my very first initial from a distance impression, and I mean it. I mean everything that I said with a kind of respect. Actually, it's part of what fascinates me so much.
Like, and almost in a way, like, from my perspective, I mean, I taught English like most foreigners do over there, so I never got to sort of work in the trenches for a proper Japanese company, air quotes. But from what I've seen, Aggretsuko might just be the most realistic depiction of Japan I've ever seen in an anime. Like, just the more day to day, what life's like, sort of thing.
Real quick, my wife, her family lived in Japan because her father had to relocate to Japan for his job. So she finished up high school. Her brother did, I think, almost all of high school there. And I've, for over the decade that I've been involved with this family, have heard all kinds of stories. And I think I almost wish Melissa had watched the show and was able to do this podcast, or gave a shit about either one, because I am always interested in hearing her perspective, because it very much is it was gaijin perspective on things. It's it is absolutely the view of Japan as seen through the eyes of an American. And one of the things that my father-in-law has always said is, there's the Japan that is projected to foreigners, then there's the real Japan, and outsiders will never know the real Japan. What do you think about that, David?
Possibly true. It's difficult to give an accurate sort of response to that, but certainly, not being Japanese, I will never fully understand what it is to be Japanese. I won't understand the intricacies of the culture. And some of that's because, from some of the Japanese people I've talked to, is they don't even understand all the intricacies of the culture. Most of them would probably be laughing at me saying that in a good way. But, and it's just kind of, there's the people who can accept that we're a guest in this country, and, there's just going to be some things that we just don't get, and that's fine. And there's other people that throw themselves into it and just destroy themselves trying to get there. And but for me with the show is it really does kind of deal with the more sort of humdrum day to day, what people think and experience for the most part. There's no giant robots or space pirates.
Right. It's very much the. If Japan
everyone isn't in high school, thank God.
If Japan was kind of collectively traumatized by the events of World War II, and it produced, and it is the impetus of so much of their culture, the pendulum kind of swings the other way with this. Was some people are just living normal lives, and there's that element of it too. I wanted to throw this out there real quick, and I want to save talking about season 2 for when we get to season 2. I want to finish unpacking season 1 first, but I gotta get to Anai real quick, because he does a rap when what's the food that they're making in that episode?
I think it's yakisoba.
Yeah, yakisoba. Which so I did call my wife into the bedroom to watch him do his rap, and I explained the episode to her. I'm like, they had to do stands because they were raising money or whatever it was they were doing, and everyone did a yakisoba stand, and my wife first bursted out laughing at that, because apparently that's a very Japanese thing. It's kind of like everybody bringing potato salad to a work picnic here in America, kind of a thing. But the other side of that was Anai's rap when he finally decides to help, I was like, that might be the most Japanese thing I've ever seen. And I said, you gotta watch this. And I was just like, just tell me what your impressions are. And she was like, that's the most Japanese thing I've ever seen. Oh my god. The second episode, the first episode is really a lot of setup. You know, you have Tan, who's your antagonist. Your hero is Aggretsuko, or Resco rather, and you just kind of goes from there, and you get a sense of who the character is when she wears sandals to work instead of her regular shoes. Now, the second episode is where her friend who's sort of a vagabond, kind of convinces her that she should follow her passions and and start a business with her, of which she has no real plan and no real way of doing this. And
this is the friend we're talking about.
Yeah, this is the friend. And so Retsuko sort of goes along in this fool's dream until she suddenly realizes, hey, wait a minute, this isn't really going to happen. And and by that point, the cat's out of the bag that she's going to quit, which of course Tan holds over her head for the whole remainder of the season. So I wanted to address that because it really does color the next 8 episodes. So go ahead and let's just talk about that for a minute, Dave.
Okay, so again, this is me being a semi-armchair expert on Japan, but are you familiar with the lifetime employment system in Japan?
No.
No.
So basically, there is an unwritten was an unwritten contract between employers and employees that basically, if you get a job at the company, you will never be fired. You will have a job till the day you die. Don't worry about it. The price you pay for that is you will work yourself to death until you die, probably at your desk. Yeah, and in modern day, I'd say it's kind of leaned a bit more towards the employee still maintaining the work themselves to death attitude, and the employers not so much maintaining the we will take care of you attitude.
That's something from their gaming industry that I've become very familiar with through the news over the years.
Yeah, but it also does sometimes actually work. I know I forget the exact names, but there was a bank that went bankrupt, a few decades ago now, and the CEO he got up in front of everyone and says I promise I will find every one of you a new job before I'm done, and he did. He just went and made sure that all of his employees they were taken care of after the company went under, and that was just an example of that sort of culture. So work is incredibly important in Japanese culture. It's just about the only excuse I've ever found to excuse yourself from any sort of social events is, I can't make it because of work. It's a very important aspect of the culture. It is almost all devouring in some ways.
I have a weird side question though.
Okay.
Why is that the only excuse to excuse yourself from a social occasion?
Well, in my case, I was sort of doing martial arts while I was there, so there's a lot of weekend training and after parties, and so just sort of sometimes you say so it's it was we want to go out for drinks afterwards, and you're sort of saying you're tired, you want to go home, you're still part of the group and expected to go along with the group. So if you say sorry, I can't make it, and they'll be why? And then they'll be oh, do you have work? I'm like, yeah, I got work. It's okay, it's just sort of more acceptable there. Again, it's just bit of a different culture.
No, and again, and I keep coming back to this because I feel like I made a bad impression the first time with what I initially said. Make no mistake, my presumptions are not all based off anime, and like I said, I find so much of this so fascinating in part because as a Westerner, when we look at some of this stuff, at first you can see how it kind of becomes a little bit of a joke butt for how silly some of it seems. But then when you actually look kind of beneath the surface at the foundations for some of these traditions and some of these norms and some of these kind of unwritten social contracts, it makes a kind of sense.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get at with that whole thing is just to show how great a portrayal Aggretsuko looking for another job is. Like that is not something that is taken lightly. I mean, I haven't really experienced this in a company, of course, but because teaching English, that is your primary means of career advancement, is getting a better job. But that's okay. They got 50 people waiting outside the door to come and teach, so no hard feelings. But it's a bit of a different world for us foreigners in Japan. But anyway, but yeah, like, so you have, and even I'm kind of like trying not to sound as too much of an expert here, because again, I'm not super on the inside of this stuff.
Sure.
So I'm still somewhat of an outsider looking in. But yeah, like, so yeah, her looking for a new job and them finding that out is kind of a big deal in my view. And that she used a work computer to do it on, which is not a good idea at all.
So we're talking, this is not the same thing as here in the States, discreetly covering up your phone while you're shopping your resume around Monster and fielding emails and maybe using sick days to go and discreetly do an interview.
Yeah, and like having a home computer is kind of more of a nerd thing in Japan.
Really?
Like a person like Aggretsuko, she would not have her own computer, maybe a laptop, but she would use a personal computer mostly at home.
See, I think we have a hard time imagining.
Mostly at work, sorry. Yeah.
I think we have a hard time imagining a young woman in her early 20s, especially a young professional woman in her early 20s, not being kind of fully digitally kitted out.
Yeah, like there was times when I was teaching where I would do something what I would consider simple on a computer with a word processor, and like the teachers would be like, "Wow, you're a genius." I'm like, "No, like really, this is pretty simple, guys. Like this isn't even hacking or like coding or anything. It's just like I do which button to push." And,
David, you should see me at work where I am the master of spreadsheets, because I work with mental health clinicians and social workers who don't mess with spreadsheets and they are alien to them. So I'm the spreadsheet genius.
Yeah, okay, so maybe it's not as much of a Japan thing as I had initially thought, but I digress. We're going to have a lot of these tangents on the show. Thank you for sticking with us if you're still here.
No, this is legitimately fascinating.
Okay, yeah, so... Jeez, get my screen back. All right, yeah, so she has been looking at another job using her work computer, and she's busted for that. Now, in her defense, this is kind of a crappy situation that she's in. Like, Boston would be considered what would be called like a monster boss. Like, just, kind of abusive, very old-fashioned. Like you mentioned, sort of talking about women in the workplace in Japan. I mean, nowadays, things, from what I hear, have gotten quite a bit better. But yeah, it's usually the sort of traditional old-fashioned way of things is, if you're a girl, you graduate school, you get a job in the company, and that basically lets you kill time until you find a husband, then you get married, and you're off to do the housewife thing.
Because it's like, culturally, you're almost describing Japan as if they were stuck in the 50s America.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
It's 2020.
Yeah,
and this is a highly technological society. I mean, like you think of most of our electronics and stuff come from Japan. These are like, our education system is like, huffing and puffing and, trying to catch up to Asia, China and Japan. Meanwhile, what you're describing is like very, very 50s.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, and speaking of which, in terms of technological advancement, we had to like send in our timesheets with a fax machine.
Shut up.
I am not. I kid you not. Like it's one of the most fascinating things that you have this like super technologically advanced society, which is amazing. But then you also just find these like, really, you're still using that? Like, come on, like.
Our society has been overrun with robots doing everything for us. What are you doing your calculations on? An abacus. Japan.
Yeah. Kind of like there is a Facebook group. They're kind of like The Onion, but for Japan, called The Rising Wasabi. And like the first thing. I mean, not everything they put out is great, but they have some real good ones. And then like the best one was, Japanese company invents robot to use fax machine. I just could not stop laughing because, like, only if you have experienced it will you understand exactly why that was perfect. But I digress. So so Ton kind of is a bit more of an old-fashioned boss, which kind of fits in with his age. And yeah, like for example, he keeps on asking Retsuko to make him tea. Like that used to be like the thing is, if you're the young girl in the office, it is your job to make everyone tea. That is now pretty much considered sexism and harassment to do in the office.
Right.
So to do that nowadays, yeah, like that would have been like considered harassment to ask, especially a female employee, to make tea. If she wanted to make tea on her own, then great, good for her. But yeah, it's no longer expected.
Sean,
sort of thing. So things do happen, but it's kind of more quiet in Japan. Like their revolutions tend to be more beneath the surface.
We need to talk about director Gori and Miss Washimi next, but before we
yeah, we'll get to them.
I just want to give Sean his moment here to talk about that second episode where Retsuko is nearly led to a gilded path, and it just sets all of this horribleness in motion. Do you have any reactions to that?
Protein.
We're not quite there yet, but
I don't know. I'm not sure how to feel about that. Now that I've kind of heard everything David has had to say, but I know that my first initial impression of it is that, yeah, that indeed sounds very much like a very Western kind of arc, like kind of metropolitan working girl takes up yoga, gets in touch with herself, and all of a sudden that ignites kind of this whole personal revolution. It was definitely a very quirky way to go about it, because I mean, you start to change the way you look and the way your body feels, and it kind of, from experience, it kind of sets everything else on a different path sometimes too. You just kind of start to see the world in a more honest light. It's like by that combination of making these two unlikely friends that, to her surprise, actually seem to hold her in great, genuine esteem as a person and as kind of an equal. It's like that's the moment when she starts to understand, have I maybe been selling myself a little bit short?
I'm fascinated by the idea that Japan has fleeky people, like anywhere else in the world.
Oh, there are. Like it's it's a very ordered society, I would say. Like there's definite, everyone knows sort of what's expected, and it's a very don't rock the boat sort of thing. Like there's a sort of expression of like the sort of two faces. Mm-hmm. You have what's called like a tatemae, which is like your outside face, your public face, and then you have your hone, which is like your true self. Like a lot of like when we hear what's going on inside Retsuko's head, that's more her hone, like her real feelings. Whereas tatemae is sort of her politeness towards others, even in situations where she doesn't like it.
Okay.
Again, it's just don't rock the boat. Let's all get along. And then meanwhile, in the background, I secretly wish to rip out your guts and feast on your entrails, sort of thing.
I was more thinking about the friend there, just because because the friend is pitching her like, come on, Retsuko, find your passion, and and Retsuko buys in hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. And then it's like, well, do you have a plan? Like, do you have a way to make this actually work? Like, squirrel, and it's
Well, in this case, like as in pretty much all societies, there are people who go against the grain. Mm-hmm. And while Puko, I think is her friend's name, she's not really like an anti-establishment type, but she is kind of more of a laissez-faire, like just I go where the wind blows sort of character. Yeah. And like it's she doesn't realize what Retsuko's going through, so as she sort of like ambivalently offering her this really tempting way out. I mean, you get to work at this nice little cute shop, and you can sell things from all around the world. Like it's a very attractive proposition for Retsuko. And then Retsuko, of course, she starts preparing and getting in line for it, and then she's like, okay, when do we start? She's like, yeah, I'm just going to do it online, and yeah, like it's not working out. And then she's like, I'm so grateful there's people like you who are responsible and work really hard at jobs they hate, so I can just do whatever the heck I want and not have to worry about like society and consequences. Like
suddenly Retsuko turns into Jim Cornette talking about Vince Russo. I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, I was thinking more Admiral F-Bomb from Picard at that first meeting there. The hubris.
Picard, finally for next week, guys. Fuck up.
I was thinking like the first meeting there.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, certainly that. But again, like Retsuko, she takes it in stride and just like, oh well. It's kind of funny. Like I would sort of say, like the two most important jobs, the words that I can associate with like the Japanese workplace as I have seen it, is there's one called gambate or gambaru, which is like do your best, keep fighting, never give up, and the other one is shogunai, which is it can't be helped. Like that's just pretty much every situation. It's just like work hard and well, can't be helped. That's the way things are.
So this sets up, like I said, for the rest of the season, it's kind of Ton versus Retsuko, and one of the allies she makes along the way, two of the allies she makes along the way, because at this point I think she's just like looking for like a way out, looking for things to distract her from the shitstorm she's just now started on herself. She meets. By
the way, Boss Ton playing golf all the time and practicing for golf. That is very stereotypical bad boss behavior.
That is also very American.
Oh yeah.
And the 3 martini lunch. Director Gori, who is a gorilla, and Miss Washimi, who is a secretary bird, from what I've been told.
Yeah, she's secretary to the CEO.
So they meet doing yoga, and they kind of take her on as like like their little buddy. They're like and it's been a little over a week since I watched the show, but I think they get a sense from her, and they're like, this is clearly somebody who needs us, because when they're presented on screen for the first time, they're doing the hot lady walk.
It's one power walk.
Yeah, it's one foot in front of the other. You hear she's got legs by ZZ Top in the background. It's that it says "working girl" over their head. I
love the theme music. There's some good theme music for different characters in this show.
I was gonna say the music in this is spot on. So here are these powerful women who project power and confidence and everything else, and they see her and they see she's pained, and they're kind of like, come on with us. Let's take you under our wing. And they bond over yoga, and then they find themselves. Now, the karaoke thing is Retsuko's like hideaway from home. It's her place to just sort of vent and get it all out of her system.
Yeah, it's her release, and again, this is her like hone. This is her true self expressing herself, and not something to be shown in public.
Right. And it's something that as somebody who does a metal podcast and is, not afraid to kind of show his, testosterone-y side to people, especially if I can get a reaction, I found I was greatly amused by the idea of I can't let people know I listen to metal in public. I can't let people in public know I listen to metal. They'll think I'm crazy.
You know what? A man or a woman is whatever room they are in at the time.
So I was greatly amused by that because, I think we're long past the age. What did Chris Armstrong call it? Like the metal panic, manic panic, whatever it was, what phrase he used. But I think there are still people who are like, I work in a white collar, uptight kind of surroundings. I can't let them know that like I'm into MMA or I'm into metal or I'm into something that looks that wouldn't fit in with that class. And so she has that anxiety when they take her to the karaoke bar, her karaoke bar, and lo and behold, when she bursts out into that deathcore, they're into it and it becomes a thing. So let's go ahead. So go ahead, Dave. Tell me about your thoughts on Miss Washimi and Director Gori.
Yeah, Washimi and Gori are great characters. Like it kind of tells you everything you need to know when you see them first introduced, like you say, doing the power walk down the hall, and Retsuko's just like, wow, like they're amazing. And then they turn the corner, and then no one's looking, and then they just like, hunch over, like, oh, my legs hurt so much.
Yep. As soon as they're out of sight.
Like, and then it's like, no, we have to keep it up. We can't show a moments of weakness, which is in some ways kind of sad that they have to project that much power, like just to get sort of the respect in their chosen careers. But yeah, like they're good people, and they've been around, and they kind of know a lot more about the working world, especially as from a female perspective. So yeah, it was they did want to help Retsuko out, but at the same time she was also very shy because they are seniors from work. There is that bit of a hierarchy, even though the hierarchy kind of dissolves a bit outside of work, though we'll get to that more when we talk about drinking parties. But yeah, I always kind of felt like that was the way the show was going to go, is that they'd eventually connect up and they'd sort of help show her the ropes a bit, which they do in a way, but again, Retsuko still kind of has to deal with a lot of her own problems, and as we'll eventually see, her getting Washimi to sort of pull strings has some fairly unintended consequences down the line. But yeah, that yoga teacher is probably one of the best characters.
Sean, Director Gory, Miss Washimi, go.
I really haven't got much more to add. Like I said, I think, as was already said, I think my favorite moment is just the instant they're out of sight, and as I said a second ago, a man or a woman is whatever room they are in at the time, and sometimes that shifting of gears just kind of happens in an instant. You have that brief moment of weakness where you kind of indulge it for a moment, and then as soon as you have to move a step forward into the next set of waters,
it also kind of goes to show that everyone at work, no matter what their position, has struggles.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm curious. I mean, in Japan, is there kind of that sort of liberty to kind of congregate and sort of fraternize, sort of above or below certain lines without it having it be looked down upon?
I don't really think I kind of have the experience to really give an authoritative answer to that question. Mm-hmm. I mean, there certainly is hierarchy in most businesses. I mean, you might have noticed that they actually all wear uniforms at work. Like, they always, you get to work, they change, and then they're all in the same uniforms while they work, and then they change back out. So it's kind of like a great sort of equalizer while they're in the company. There's a lot of, the group is very important. Like, and it doesn't matter what group it is. Like, if it's your group of friends, your group at work, if you're doing any sort of extra curricular activities, like that sort of being part of the group and being considered part of the group is quite important. Like, even if you leave the group, especially under like good circumstances, you'll always be part of that group.
What does that really stem from?
Oh geez, we're getting into like having to do a whole other podcast here, but I think it's just some sort of cultural things. I think you could sort of say like just the size of the country for starters. Like it's not a small country, but it's also not a super big country. Like it's you can keep it together even without modern technology, and there is that sort of isolation from it being an island. Again, not like super far away from the mainland, but far enough away that it doesn't have to interact with the outside any more than it really wants to. And again, like oceans of ink have been spilled on this topic, and we're sort of getting into the what makes a culture a culture. But it is just kind of like from our perspective, where we're both from like very individualistic countries, and we tend to be very open with how we feel about things and situations. That's just kind of the way we do things, right? We just shout out our opinions or our thoughts, and then we kind of just wrestle out, a decision from that. Whereas, Japan, it seems to be more like people slowly poking and prodding, testing the waters until kind of slowly everyone just comes together into a consensus. And like it's just different, but yeah, like certainly in the office, things are run very hierarchical. But then there's also ways that it will. There are releases outside of that. So yeah, certainly at the company, Washimi and Gori, they are up in their positions, and Aggretsuko, even I said Aggretsuko now. Retsuko, yeah, take a drink. Yeah, Retsuko is at a lot lower station in the company. So there is sort of a pecking order, like like where people sit in a room is very determined. Like if you're getting into a car, there's a certain order of seniority of like who sits next to the door, who's in the center row. If you go into like the principal's office at a school, for example, or the CEO's office, there's like people sit in a certain order. And even if you look at the layout of Retsuko's office, you see Ton is sitting at his desk overlooking all the rows of employees. Again, that's sort of a supervisory position, and even within those rows, there's probably going to be like a certain like where people sit based on like their job or their importance. It's kind of interesting.
So Mark, we have an entire country that is pretty much analogous to the stories we've always heard of backstage professional wrestling culture.
Maybe, but then you have outside of that hierarchy, then that hierarchy is no longer in effect. I mean, Retsuko is still very, cautious about approaching Washimi and Gori, because she's a bit intimidated by who they are. But also she's like, we see each other at work. I have to go and introduce myself. That's just the polite thing to do, or the socially acceptable thing to do. So it does give them some freedom outside of the company, but once inside the company, it's sort of a different order. At least that's my understanding.
We need to talk about Haida and then
Yes.
Rezuzuke. Now, in setting this up, a lot of this season, as I've said before now a couple of times, deals with the tension between Tone and Retsuko. However, Retsuko, I'm going to keep doing that. I do the same thing with Asuka. I still want to say Asuka, and I'm like, nope, it's Asuka. But
I assume you both watched the English dub.
Yep.
Yeah, that explains it.
So Retsuko also, parallel to the issues with Tone, has also kind of gotten in the back of her head, fuck it, I'll just get married and that'll get me out of this.
Yeah, that was option 2, right? The get a new job thing didn't work out, so it was like, well, marriage, the traditional escape.
Sure. Also, in some sectors, a very American thing. Like, I went to college to meet my husband. That's a thing that happens here. So that brings us to Haida, who is every guy and every guy I've ever been friends with. It's just always the bridesmaid and never the bride. He's like always perpetually in the friend zone. Has long had a thing for our hero, and she likes every man on earth but him.
He made some progress in the Christmas special.
Definitely.
I didn't watch that one. I watched.
It was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm definitely exaggerating, but it's like I felt for this character because he, like I said, he is every guy I've ever known. He is like, he's so nice to her. All he wants to do is make her happy and be with her, and she is looking everywhere but at him. Now, contrast that with the guy she ends up with in this season. This is meal ticket number 1, or so she thinks, Rezuzuke, who is a mop, who she decides to date. And it's so funny because I watched this after I finished BoJack Horseman, and I don't know if either one of you have ever seen it, but there's a line from one of the characters that talks about having to squint to see the happiness in your relationship, and she's tired of squinting. And that resonated with me a lot because I have both seen and experienced throughout my life the idea of trying to bang a square peg into a round hole and getting a relationship to work.
I love you so much.
Are you okay?
Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't witness the glorious dance to the bathroom that Carrie just.
Okay. So
Okay, moving on.
So with both characters, like I definitely resonate. A lot of what goes on with them in season 1 resonated with me. One, the idea of always the bridesmaid, never the bride, always perfectly in the friend zone, and then Rezuzuke, her trying. She's obviously not the guy. He's obviously not the guy for her, but she is trying desperately to reconfigure this relationship so that it'll work out in her favor. And this mop is utterly immovable. And finally, she just hits a breaking point where she's like, "Nope, I cannot fool myself any longer into thinking this is right for me. I have to abandon ship." So, David, let's talk about Haida and Rezuzuke.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, as much as Haida is, for the most part, friend-zoned, he does take it well. Like there's certainly moments where he drowns his sorrows, and Feneko, love Feneko, has to sort of, deal with his emotional baggage, but, he never seems to get resentful.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't go full
props,
incel.
Yeah, exactly. So props to him. He takes it on the chin, and he keeps on going with his life, and he still. I get the sense that he cares for Retsuko because he cares for Retsuko. He's not sort of there trying to put in the quarters until he gets a prize.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's not Leonard from The Big Bang Theory.
Kinda, yeah. So. Yeah. Anyway, it's been a while since I've seen Big Bang Theory, so.
They always joked about the way that Leonard got Penny was just a perpetual insistence upon her until she finally gave up. He's not like that.
I mean, he did have a couple of girlfriends along the way, so
right.
He wasn't like pining outside her door for like 5 seasons or however long it took for them to finally get together.
Sure,
but yeah, he certainly he stuck around long enough for the writers to decide, okay, fine, we'll finally have a relationship.
If we don't Sam and Diane these two, people are going to start throwing things at the studio.
Yeah, but this isn't the Will They Won't They podcast, but that actually we could do like an episode just on Will They Won't They.
Really, there's certainly been enough of them.
Yeah. I bug my wife sometimes by like every time there's like we start a new show and there's a man and a woman lead and they're sniping at each other like, oh, will they, won't they?
I may have said this in a previous podcast, but my friend Nick drove me nuts one night because we were watching. I said before we were going out someplace, we were probably going dancing. But I was like, before we left, I'm like, hey, I just want to watch this one episode of Melrose Place. He was like, ugh, you thing I can't say on the air anymore. You can't believe you watch Melrose Place. And I'm like, no, it's a fine show. And I'm like, fine, I'll watch it. And then we can go dancing. I'm like, that's great. And literally every time a male and female character were in frame, he was like, are they going to fuck? The entire hour.
Yes, I don't really bug my wife with that. She thinks it's funny, and she's picked up on it now too. But anyway, so yeah, it's but yeah, Rezuzuke, it's kind of scary now looking back on some of my failed relationships. I should have realized that it was, I was keeping that thing on life support. I should have just realized that she wasn't the one, and it was just best for the both of us to not pursue it anymore. But
there's a lot of Homer's flying pig relationships out there.
It's
still good.
Yeah, but again, that's kind of like a mature thing to say. Like it's a lot of the time we get that whole Hollywood storybook romance or romantic comedy, stereotypical story, and it's just kind of nice to have what? Yeah, this isn't working, and I'm deluding myself. And
I think it's also very stereotypical of a female character, because it comes from the stereotype of women in general. I'll fix him.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about Rezuzuke because there's not much to say about Rezuzuke.
I love Rezuzuke.
He's not bad. He's just comically oblivious.
He's my second favorite character in this entire series.
Yeah, but I kind of have to put a little pin in that because I do have a bit more to say, but that's after we kind of finish getting through Retsuko and Boston.
Sean, your reactions to Haida and Rezuzuke?
Haida pleases me because that would have been such an opportunity to play to the lowest common denominator and really have him go full just raisin-sized balls to the wall, red pill incel.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much that's a thing in Japan. Like it might be, but I'm not sure.
Japan don't got neckbeards?
Oh no. Oh no! I know that in
I mean,
Japan
there've
it's not,
been a
but
couple
that's...
of violent outbursts, but overall,
but that's my point. That's one of the things that I like about Japanese media so much, is the fact that that's kind of what I was getting at. Is that if this were a Western series, that's more than likely what would have happened with him at some point.
Sure, he'd have turned into Bane by the end of the series.
Yeah, is there would have been an arc where he would have at least temporarily gone down that road, and it was so refreshing to see a character just avert that.
Though in like the Christmas special, he does get to walk her home, which doesn't sound like much, but him saying, "Can I walk you back to the station?" and her saying yes, that is kind of like, okay, like you're kind of, I'm gonna let you in a little bit here. Like there is that kind of acknowledgement, but I mean, it's not like a "take me, I'm yours," but it is it is a sort of way of her not explicitly stating, like, okay, you're all right, like
right.
I'm letting you in a little closer. And I actually do think Haida might eventually end up dating Retsuko, because like you see him outside of work, and he's got like the leather jacket, the guitar. Like it seems like he could get along pretty good with like a girlfriend that likes to do death metal karaoke.
You know what? Personally, just real briefly, I'm kind of rooting for him to end up with Feneko.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with that too. Like, as long as if you're going to subvert expectations, as long as it's like a intelligently well done subversion of expectations, like I'm down with it. Like, just as long as it makes sense.
Well, but you mentioned, depictions of incel culture not so much being a thing in Japan, but the thing is, and this is something that
just look at the view of otaku. there is a incel culture.
Well, and you keep hitting me with these segues midway to my point.
Sorry. You're in my wheelhouse, Sean.
What'd you say?
You're in my wheelhouse, Sean.
I know, but just hear this out from someone else who is kind of at a different point within your wheelhouse. I'm getting to something here personally.
Yeah.
Is the thing you have to remember is that my girlfriend and my future stepson are both huge Japanophiles. They have been the ones holding my hands, kind of leading me down this path, and which is why I again stress I'm very new to this. And but over the past 3 years, a lot of the shows they've kind of both dove into, and I've frequently kind of mocked this / in conversation with both of them / kind of expressed my honest opinion. Is they've kind of frustrated me because they've sort of fallen into the same very general trope. And trope number one is, as I pointed out to them a few times, extremely stupid, unimaginative title that when you say it to somebody, it sounds like an anime parody. Such as, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime.
Oh, yeah.
Is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon? How Not to Summon a Demon Lord. In Another World with My Smartphone.
Yeah,
that's just the tip of the stupid iceberg, though.
Yeah,
because
that's more of a newer thing, but yeah.
Because
I understand.
But then you also get into these same kind of structural tropes, and that is, number one, every fucking thing from aesthetic to actual premise has to somehow be based on an RPG.
Well, they're trying to sell RPGs. That's easy to explain.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the fad right now, so.
And then this is where you get kind of the big one, which is why I say Haida is so refreshing. Your main character is almost always super secluded nerd, gets sucked into fantasy world, and gets all of the whammons without really having to earn anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just escapist fantasy for your insert audience character.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
on a quick side note, on the subject of like shows where people get transported into another world, I'd recommend you look into a show called The 12 Kingdoms, where first of all, it's not like a crazy incel loner super guy. It's just a typical like high school girl. But it's quite well done, and one of the best additions that they made for the show is one of her classmates also gets transported there, and she loves those kinds of books. So she's like, "Yes, chosen one narrative, I'm in." and it just kind of things don't turn out the best for her. Like apparently, this is not as much fun as it is in the books.
Yeah, see, but exactly though and I get that incel culture is very much a Western thing. God knows I've been a part of the Overwatch community long enough to recognize that in spades. But at the same time, yeah, a lot of those kinds of shows I just described, they really kind of call out to Western incel culture, and it's the popularity is kind of down. Is kind of downright obnoxious. And while I know that wasn't the intention of the original creators, it's something that just kind of happens. Nevertheless, when that's kind of what I've been exposed to so much over about the past year or two, where it seems like every other anime that I've seen seems to paint by those numbers, Haida is so refreshing in that he doesn't go that way. He's much more stable. He's much more accepting. He's, albeit, clearly frustrated on a certain level. He's also much more grateful, understanding, loyal, and humble.
He's more of a mature character.
Yes. He
treats things like an adult.
Yes, that is the two best catch-all words. He is the mature adult of this lot, even more so than Feneko.
Yeah, I just love Feneko's like borderline stalkerish ability to analyze social media.
Exactly.
And her laugh.
Exactly, and I get the sense that it seems like almost kind of an obvious pairing. But it feels like even for as inevitable as it seems, it would still be so satisfying if those were the two that happily ended up together, and if we could get that without some kind of sort of expected, almost telegraphed moment wherein either Haida or Retsuko maybe starts to second guess their feelings, where it's just like this is a thing that happens and everyone is pretty much just accepting of the whole thing.
Okay, to move this along, is there anything else in season 1 you want to address? I will say that the stuff with Retsuko and Tone eventually kind of works itself out. She and Rezuke end up breaking up because she realizes he is a mop, and this relationship that she's fashioned is sort of fictional. He is not the man for her. And that takes us to season 2. So anything else about season 1 that you wanted to touch on before we move on?
Sure. Yeah, I have a few notes here. So one of the things I like is sort of the mature treatment of some of the characters, like Tsunoda. She's like the deer. She's sort of like the young cute thing in the office that she's really good at sucking up to the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like you have behind her back, Feneko's like, oh, I hate that girl. Because of that, and then there's this great bit where Retsuko tries to emulate her, and she asks her for advice on what to do. And the best part of that exchange was when Tsunoda sort of says, I know people hate me for doing this. I know this is not a fair way of advancing in the world, but it works for me, and I've just accepted that. Like that sort of self-awareness where she understands who she is and what she's doing, and the sort of price that she has to pay for that. That she does have an easier time at work, but at the same time she does have the resentment of her coworkers. Again, it's kind of like yeah, and it's kind of nice that these characters do kind of get a chance to be a bit more self-aware and to sort of justify themselves. And which brings me to, of course, when they do go to the drinking party, because Gori and Hoshimi recommend that she go to the drinking party. Now, again, these are very popular at Japanese companies, and again, if you're in sort of any sort of groups, drinking parties are kind of a big thing that happen a lot. And this is kind of a chance for everyone to, de-stress, let their hair down. And even then, it kind of also allows for a bit of sort of like backdoor diplomacy, you could say.
Kind of like, playing golf with the higher-ups.
Yeah, kind of like that. Again, yeah, we'll get to playing golf in season 2, but but yeah, here it's like you go to these places, everyone sort of chips in like 3,000 yen, so like $30, and it's basically all you can drink and snacks, and there's usually like you have to, it's good form to sort of go around the room, sort of pouring a drink for everyone. Usually, you start at the top with your boss and say, thanks for being good to me. Please continue to help me out, so on and so forth, and they might strike up a chat with you about how things are going, and then other people might come and say, like, oh, let's work good together, and pour you a drink, and everyone just gets totally sloshed. But the nice thing is about that is, like, once you have alcohol in the system, you can kind of get away with letting the mask slip off, because sort of like anything you say, it's just like, oh, yeah, they were drunk, it happens, just drunk ramblings. So like, yeah, you can pretty much get totally shit-faced and just scream at your boss, tell them how much of a monkey's ass you think they are, and how much you just want to take a big dump on their desk. And then the next day you come in to work, it's like, oh, hey, thanks for coming to the drinking party. Yeah, it was a good time. Let's do it again sometime. And you're like, it is never mentioned again.
Sure.
Yeah, but and again, that's part of it. So we get like this great moment where like Ton's been ratted out to the boss through Washimi. So he's under the magnifying glass and is faking being super nice and benevolent at work. And we get this bit where like Aggretsuko mentions the last time she went to a drinking party, Ton chewed her out for not having the label of the beer facing upwards at the drinking party. I mean, one, it's not expensive beer they're drinking, not for 3,000 yen.
Is having the label facing up really a big deal?
I'm not sure. I personally have never come across that. I mean, people are usually just happy enough to be drinking beer. Yeah. or maybe they're just enamored that they get to talk to the foreign guy, because you do get a little bit of status being the one foreign guy.
See, I just wondered if maybe that was like some weird personal quirk of his where I just like to see the label of what I'm drinking while it's being poured.
I think it might be like aesthetically better. I mean, there's a lot of little stuff like that in sort of little sort of like rituals and decorum in Japan. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a real thing. And so yeah, she goes. Oh, by the way, like for any of you foreigners, people think of living as a foreigner in Japan, if you tell them you like Japanese alcohol, like what we call sake in Japanese Nihonshu. Sake is just the Japanese word for alcohol. Mm-hmm. You will get a lot of free drinks. They will think like, this is awesome. He likes Japanese drinks. Like get this man another beer or sake or sort of thing. So pro tip guide if you like it. So I have to find my spot again now. So she this time around she pours it with the label facing up, and Ton acknowledges that. He's like, oh, you remember it. It's like, I mean, you're still not quite doing it right. And then she shows her, and then they kind of start to have this little bonding thing of, it's like, yeah, I guess I do come on a bit hard, but that's the way it was when I started in the company. Like, you weren't given any sort of mercy. You were just expected to take it and learn. And then just as they're kind of having this nice bonding, she lets it slip that, oh, I bet the president will be so happy that you've changed your ways. And he's like, what? It's like, it was you. And instantly it all just goes to crap. And then we get like the great diss track where Ton gets up and he just starts rapping, because again, karaoke is quite popular at these events, and it's kind of his chance to really give his assessment of things. And he does, like, he just tears her apart. Like, like, why should I care about you? You don't put in any extra effort. You're just counting down the days till you can find something better. What kind of a boss would invest in an employee that doesn't want to invest back into their job? And I think even Haida's like, he's right. Like, he's totally right about this. Yeah, and so I like the fact that even Ton, as lousy of a boss as he is, gets a sort of chance to sort of come off as like, he's not entirely wrong with.
He's not entirely his caricature.
Yeah, I mean, still what he is doing is taking things too far, but you see his reasoning behind it. It's not just pure malevolence. And then we get my favorite moment of the entire season. Aggretsuko gets the mic, and you're just waiting for this to go down. You know exactly what's happening, and it is glorious. And then, like, you just see the desolation of the room, and then the perfect timing of the waiter coming in asking for last round, because, like, I've been there. It was just a perfect take on it. The timing was exceptional. I just lost it. I was cracking up so hard. And then you get the next episode, and no one's mentioning it. No one's mentioning like Aggretsuko can do death metal. No one's saying, oh man, you sure destroyed him. But Ton's a little easier on her. And then, as I was mentioning before, like when she's dealing with Rezusuke, he kind of comes into like the little kitchenette and sort of gives her a bit of advice that you shouldn't try and make a dead relationship work just to try and escape from your job. And he says like he mentions that even though I'm your shitty boss, try and listen to this advice. And so even though they have this antagonistic relationship, she's still his employee, and he still kind of does have that little bit of consideration for her. He's looking out for her in his own way.
Yeah, there's no like really evil, malevolent characters, out to destroy people on this show. You have, I think it's actually a good representation of. It's so funny because these are like animated animal characters, and in some cases they're exaggerations. I think you kind of have to exaggerate for drama, but I would say like this does a fairly good job of representing like what it's like to to be in the world, and deal with various people. Did you catch my meaning, Dave?
It's adulting the anime.
Yeah, very much so. And I think like there's just enough exaggeration for there to be drama and tension and the things that you want in an entertainment vehicle, but not so much to where it becomes like cringy. And you're like, okay, like there were times where Modern Family, just as an example, I mean, and I choose Modern Family 1 because it's fresh in my mind. It just ended its 11-year run. But like Modern Family is this Emmy Award winning, heavily lauded, like staple of American television for the last decade. And there were times, as a fan of the show, I had to fast forward through it because I'm like, oh my god, people don't act this way. You can't be this stupid. And I never got that with this show. It always maintained like just the right pitch to where like, okay, I get it. This is how people are. Anything else about the first season, David? If not, we'll go over to Sean for his.
No, I think I'm pretty much through the most of it.
Okay, Sean, your final thoughts on season 1.
I'll tell you, one thing that this season establishes about this show, and I think kind of sometimes about Japanese media and even anime in general, is that I think audiences outside Japan will see anime and manga as being more dependent on tropes and stock characters than they actually are, because the characters in Aggretsuko are not that simple. And David outlined it so perfectly, except for the fact that I would go one step further with the more heartfelt tea room conversation. That kind of brief look, let's just kind of set our roles aside and almost set our characters aside and just be honest for a second. Ton, eventually just kind of laying down the law with, look, I get it. You don't like me. I don't like you, but that doesn't mean I don't care. Especially my favorite line from arguably the entire season, although I'm about to paraphrase and probably butcher it. And that's why we That's why we come to work, to kick more ass together than we ever could alone.
I forgot that line, but it's a good one.
Yeah. And much like David, I loved that Ton absolutely breaks it down and gives it to her straight and says at one point, well, prior to that, says, why should I give you any more credit? You go through the motions. And it's kind of what everyone at some point eventually needs to hear. You want more than what you've realistically earned. You're just not willing to admit that to yourself. And they really could have, with this show, gone almost the classic, almost Mary Tyler Moore route with Aggretsuko, where she kind of gets everywhere and makes it, after all, based on sheer spunk. And it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes Aggretsuko is the one who has to be kind of knocked down to earth, and maybe even be kind of reminded, you're only seeing this through one set of eyes, and that's yours. You're only thinking about what you want. You're only thinking about what's right for you. You aren't really considering the part anybody else is playing in this. And it makes this just all the more satisfying that not everything is predictable. Yeah, things don't work out with Radulich, but that doesn't mean that she necessarily ends up having a big sappy romantic moment with Haida at the end of the show, or even at the end of the Christmas special. Everybody is still a little bit lost at the end of the season and still finding their way, but they're at least a little bit more sure of where they are and how they lost their way. And that alone kind of makes the whole thing worth it.
So, Season 2 has my favorite character in it. Now, the bulk of Season 2 is still Aggretsuko with marriage on her mind and trying to figure out what to do with herself in the work environment that she's in. A lot of this stuff with Tone at this point is more or less resolved. We also meet her mother in this season. But I just want to get right into my favorite character. I loved Season 2 more than Season 1 because of this character. He's the most real character I've ever seen in anything I've ever watched. Anai. Anai is amazing. The funny thing about this guy is, so he's new to the business, he's new to the accounting department, and Aggretsuko has the dubious honor of having to train him. And of course, he has some difficulties with some very simple tasks like answering the phone. And when she tries to give him criticism, perfectly understandable constructive criticism, he at first takes it okay, but then starts sending her these like harassing emails and demanding to be responded to in kind. And like a virus, this spreads throughout the entire office. He's amazing. I have known people like this. I have known people who like smile to your face, and then the next thing you know, you're being dragged down to human resources because of this person. That's why I was laughing so hard at so much of the season with him, because I'm like, wow, I have lived through this. We need to talk for the next 12 hours about just how amazing Anai is. He is. The other thing about him is, I felt like if they were just kind of sitting around and doing like a word bubble of, buzzwords for 2020, 2019, like what is the average like millennial like? This is the guy. Like this is every like horrible stereotype about young 20-year-olds. David, Anai, what did you think of him?
Yeah, it's interesting because I picked up on that too. That he's very much like the millennial or zillennial, whatever it is going to be now, sort of character of he's the next generation coming into the company. And just as a quick side note, as much as it seems like Ton's dumping on Aggretsuko, it seems like he's now giving her a bit more responsibility. Like now you get to train the new guy. I'm still giving you like grunt work, but it's higher level grunt work. So it's it's not explicit, but it seems like he has by this point acknowledged her a bit, and even though he's still a tough boss, he's helping her to progress a bit now. But and it's her first time training a new person, so it's a new skill set she has to develop. And like she does, as much as she is right in criticizing him for not answering the phone, he has to answer the phone. Like, the company needs phones answered, and that's his job. But her phrasing is pretty blunt, and it does come off as being a bit, a little too hard for a guy who's, first time at work, learning to answer the phone. Like, it can be a bit scary. Like, what do I say? Do I know what I'm doing? It can be a bit intimidating for someone, just starting out. Then you do it a couple of times, and you realize it's fine.
Let me jump in here real quick. So Jesse and I earlier this year reviewed the new Poppy album, and of course, I think the name of the album was "I Disagree," and we were joking about that for the longest time because it felt like just a very young person way to be. Like, you could tell them something that is objectively true. The sky is blue. Water is wet. But you're dealing with so many people now in the culture, it feels like, whose response to that is, well, I disagree. It's like, wait, what? People who their response to things is, I feel differently. And it's like, no, but this is objectively true. Oh, I disagree. And it's like, what?
They tend to think that being generally argumentative and contrarian is the same as having an actual debate.
Right.
Yeah. Or being smarter than other people, I would assume.
Yeah. Well, I think if you wanted to put a big, broad bow on it, it would be feelings equate to objective truth. And they don't. But these people are convinced that they do. And so that, to me, is summed up in the phrase, I disagree. And I kept thinking about that as I would watch Anai speak. It's just like I didn't do anything. I told you how to answer the phone, and when you messed it up, I showed you how to do it right. And just, I disagree. Yeah, everything you did was wrong, and I have been microaggressed.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say in Anai's defense is he's probably covering his ass. He's probably heard horror stories about black companies, like the companies that treat their workers very, very poorly. So he's kind of like making sure that every interaction that could be potential power harassment is like documented, like through, there's an email chain. So if should anything happen, he can say this. This is what they did, this is their explanation for it, so on and so forth. But yeah, he does take it to the extreme where, I don't think Aggretsuko has it out for this guy. She was just like, look, you have to learn to answer the phone. Like, this is, basic stuff here, guy. We've all been there. Like, we've all messed up on our first day of work. And probably messed up on consecutive days of work, too. Like, it happens. But, so... Again, he is a bit of a caricature, maybe, because I haven't met that person in real life. Apparently, you have, Mark.
All of them, all the people.
Yeah. So, but again, it is kind of he does have a reasoning for how he is, and again, like, this is probably like your like lawnmower parenting, helicopter parenting, whatever you want to call it. This is sort of his first time. On his own, sort of dealing with things. Mom and dad aren't around to. This is Japan. Mom is not around. Dad's at work. Okay, Dad's working hard, and then he's going out drinking mandatory with his buddies after working unpaid overtime. Like, Dad's paying the bills and killing himself for it.
Japan.
Yeah, maybe things are changing there. Actually, for most of the Japanese adult men I've met are pretty loving, caring fathers. So
real quick,
but that's a stereotype.
Real quick answer: how long have you been out of Japan now?
It's getting on maybe 3 or 4 years now.
Okay, that's just curious. So yes,
I still miss it. Like seriously, anyone out there thinking of going to Japan, do it. You'll have the time of your life. It's fantastic. Great place to live. I miss so many things. Not working, though.
Carrie and I don't know about maybe living there, but we have talked about wanting to eventually travel there.
Absolutely.
At some point.
It's well worth it.
My wife keeps talking about wanting to go there someday when we have money.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, just throwing that out there. Like, I mean, it is a normal pattern for like you get the Japanophile moves to Japan, like this is going to be great, and then they experience that Japan is actually a country with people in it that live lives, and then they kind of start to get a bit jaded after that. And I wouldn't say I'm jaded, but like I've kind of the reality has set in. Let's say so, but still love it. Like, can't wait to go back, but that's not going to happen for a while. Anyway.
Yes.
Yes. So,
anything else on Anai?
I just good character. Interesting. What I like best, I think, was when he interacts with Kabai, who's like the hippo.
Yes.
Because in that case, he gets his mom back. Basically, she knows. Don't treat him as a new employee.
Right.
I'm going to treat him as like a kid. And that way of just mothering him sort of helps him through it.
So Kabai is the hippo character for people. I mean, it wasn't somebody I felt like needed a real long discussion, but I think associated to Anai and how she sort of bridges their very contentious relationship to one where it's generally amicable is a big, that's where she plays the biggest role. But for the first and second season, she's mostly just sort of this bright, happy, gossipy, middle-aged woman character. You learn a lot about her in the food stall episode. You get to see her with her kids and how she treats her kids, and that's where she gets Anai to come out of his shell a bit and help out, and she really blossoms as a character in that episode. And you see that, because I think in the first season you could be convinced that she's kind of the, nosy neighbor, gossipy office worker type, and then you realize she's actually a genuinely good person in the second season when they gave her a little bit more. Sean, talk about Anai, and if you want, Kabai.
Anai is fascinating. David definitely gave me a layer that now makes me want to go back and kind of rewatch season 2 with a different set of eyes. Because when I watched it the first time, my first thought was, yes, he's someone who's clearly trying to cover his ass and terrified of kind of screwing up in this first venture on his own. But more than anything, he seems to have the makings of an extremely cunning and formidable workplace politician. Somebody who clearly recognizes, I don't exactly have a whole lot of skill necessarily. I don't have exactly talent at any one thing, but I have an innate knack for maneuvering, for knowing how to play the chess match. And I can use that to certainly carry myself a long way, and maybe even kind of fake it till I make it, so to speak. Even if he has to do so in a very kind of opportunistic and or defensive way. So he was an interesting force of nature to introduce to the mix. Kabai, I so enjoyed the depth that they gave her over the course of this season, as opposed to just kind of being a comedic force in the first one. You learn so much respect for her along the way, especially in terms of her ability, in terms of when she does connect with Anai. And it's something that I kind of had to learn slowly as a parental figure myself. And that is, yes, everybody, especially kids, are the same. You know, everybody is a son or a daughter, but at the same time, you also have to look at them as individuals if you want to be able to reach them and get the best out of them. You can't just and Kabai seems to have that ability to do both, and in just the right measure, to kind of look at him and see who he is and kind of reach out to that person. That's something with Leo that I've kind of had to do on a few occasions, was kind of know just how to talk to him, just what to say, just how to get him into the right state of mind to get him to talk about whatever was on his mind. And it becomes something that once you've been a parent, even for a short time, it becomes easier to do when you're talking not just to kids, but to anybody else. You know, the best ones, I think, don't necessarily treat everybody the way they would their kids, but just kind of look in and just kind of see that sort of just right channel or frequency that they need to tune into. And that's why Kabai is able to get through to Anai so easily when nobody else is they're just kind of all hammers looking at him as a nail. And Kabai just kind of has that just right sort of fine touch that I can really, really appreciate.
So it is great when they like try and deploy Boss Ton as like a weapon against him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, drop the Boss Ton.
Everybody falls to Anai. It's hilarious. Okay, so that's the first half of the season. The second half of the season, so dealing with the whole thing with Anai kind of drives her to want to get away. So there's a brief interlude we need to talk about, and then we need to talk about the remainder of the season, which deals with Tadano. But before we do that, Dave, let's you... Huh?
Tadano. Sorry, go on.
Tommy Boy, got it. The interlude I'm talking about is the road trip she takes with Mishimi and
Gory,
yes, Mishimi and Gory. So that one deals less with. This is one of the few that Retsuko takes a back seat, and I thought this was a very poignant episode. I mean, these are only like 15 to 20 minute bits.
Yeah, it's a very light lunch.
Yeah, but they do a lot with the time allotted, and this one, you know, a lot of television. I've talked about this with Winfrey and others in the past. A lot of television is dialogue driven because you don't have budgets to do big action set pieces, you know, or elaborate set pieces, whatever. So, you know, a lot of. I remember South Park actually they did a Game of Thrones parody, and every time they did it, it was Cartman walking through a garden with somebody.
Yes. yeah. And we both get Xboxes.
Yes. So television is largely a collection of opportunities for characters to talk to one another, and
like the end of Star Trek Picard. Oh
boy, I have 2 more episodes left. Shut up.
Sorry.
So where I'm going with this is, you know, the art of television is the ability to create dynamic dialogue scenes. And, you know, a conversation can be very interesting. It can be very flat. It really depends on how it's structured, how it's performed, etc. And I say all that to say that Washimi and Gori have this really great, all right, mark your spot on your bingo card, kind of wrestling match of words between the two of them about the subject of marriage. There was a lot of give and take. There's a there's a denouement. There was falling action, all in this conversation, and then you've got kind of Retsuko in the background going, "Hey, mommy and daddy, don't fight." I loved this episode. This was, if I remember correctly, let's see. This was 17. Growing Affection. This was 17. So just to give you some background, at one point, because of the and situation, she's like, "I gotta get out of here. I gotta go on a road trip." But she doesn't have a license, so she starts taking driving lessons, which is where she meets. How do you pronounce his fucking name again?
Jeez, let me see if I can.
You said
Tadano.
Tadano. So she meets Tadano there, and he'll become an important character in our next bit here. But that's how that all gets started. So she finally gets her license. They go on this trip. They're drinking. They have this conversation about marriage and relationships and perceptions of each other between Washimi and Gori, and it's just brilliant. What do you think, Dave?
It's been a while since I've seen that episode, but yeah, it was a good way of sort of introducing a falling out between the two of them, which is an interesting direction to take the characters, and leading to a really great moment later on. But yeah, it sort of just starts off because Gori is very much on the hunt for a man. Like she's into that, whereas Washimi, she's already tried marriage, it didn't work out for her, so she's just, it's not worth it. I'm just going to be a career woman.
She sort of comes down on the entire. It's like, well, it didn't work out for me, but it didn't work out for me because of anything I did. It didn't work out for me because marriage as an institution is outdated and stupid.
Yeah, and then that kind of ruffles Gori's feathers, even though Gori is the gorilla, not the bird. See what I did there?
I did. Yeah. You cheeky fellow.
Yeah. I was holding it back when you said they took Aggretsuko under their wing. It's like that's the only Washimi can do that. But I digress. Yeah, but so that kind of, it's a good place to sort of like to get a more heated discussion, and then after that a little bit of like sort of those little personal annoyances or observations that you tend to keep to yourself kind of slip out, and then it's just the point of no return, and they fall out, and Retsuko's just poor Retsuko's just there in the middle trying to survive and end the war.
Yes, please, mommy and daddy, don't fight. We're talking about the conversation that takes place in the one episode between Washimi and Gori. Sean, did you have anything you wanted to add about that?
Not really, because as I sent you a message a moment ago, I was in the bathroom for a second.
Okay, but do you remember the episode at all?
Not really a whole lot, except I remember that, if I recall correctly, I think by the end of the season, Washimi and Gori kind of had pretty much kind of come full circle.
Not quite, but we'll get to that in a minute, probably.
Mm. I was gonna say it's been a bit since I gave season 2 a full rewatch, but
okay.
Like I agree with you, Mark. That Anai is like the highlight of season 2, but I would say overall season 1 was more solid overall for me. Just why we spent an hour and a half talking about season 1. Season 2 we're probably going to get through pretty quick.
Yeah, we're almost done. So that all brings us to. I keep wanting to say Tadano, and you're going to keep telling me I'm wrong.
No, you're correct. It was Tadano.
Tadano, okay. So that brings us to Tadano, who's sort of ne'er-do-well. He's hanging about. He's taking driving lessons, but he's not really committed to it. He seems kind of a shiftless layabout. Oh, it turns out he's a tech genius. So,
it's like a Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk.
Yeah. So, of course, Retsuko's tongue comes out of her mouth. Dollar signs are in her eyes. They end up in a relationship, which goes okay for a little while. Until...
I think the relationship happens before she finds out that he's like a rich genius. But yeah,
she starts having like feelings for him, because he has this like vagabond charm to him, and so she's already attracted to him. And then like afterwards, she finds out, oh wait, he's a tech genius, and then I think they end up in a relationship. But if I remember correctly. Either way, they're in a relationship for a couple of episodes, but it all comes to sort of a screeching halt when, she realizes, she thinks they're good together. He thinks they're good together. And she's like, great, we should get married. And he's like, marriage as an institution is stupid. I don't want to do it. Why do we, and it's that whole thing of why do we need to define and constrain this? Why can't we just be together? And she's like, because that's not what I want. This is a very human couple thing. There's, generally it's the woman and the man in these roles as they are depicted, but it can go the other way around. There's always somebody who, like, no, I am very much motivated by traditional mores, and I want that structure, that comfortability, that stability. Then there's the other person that's just like, I just want to be with you. Can we not do all the rigmarole? Which then erupts into them breaking up. So, David, talk to me about Tadano and Retsuko and their unfortunate uncoupling.
Yeah, well, with to go back to Rezusuke in the first season, that was just Retsuko's like, I need a man to get out of this place. Like it's almost like that song "Only a Woman" from Team America. It was like, you're here right now, so I guess you'll do. just completely making fun of like the shallow love stories in like all action movies.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're the woman, and we've spent all this time together. I guess we're in love now.
Yeah, you're not Mr. Right. You're Mr. Right now.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So in this case, it's actually a more organically developing relationship where they actually do enjoy each other's company and like each other. But yeah, then we get to the sort of bomb that, Tadano he's just not a conventionally thinking person. I mean, tech genius. So he's just like, I have no interest at all in the institution of marriage. Why can't we just hang out together forever and, do all the marriage stuff just without the actual wedding? But yeah, Retsuko, she's just not that type of person. She wants the wedding, she wants the ring, she wants that sort of more traditional married life. And again, in this, she tries to escape to rationalize staying with him, and it's Boss Ton of all people who just says like, look, he's a super genius. He doesn't need marriage. That's the way his mind works. But that's not you. And again, you're not going to be happy doing this. And it's just nice to see sort of how all the other characters sort of gather around Retsuko to sort of help her through this. Not necessarily telling her what to do, but just we know you're going through something. We want to kind of like help you move through it. Like that great moment where Gori and Washimi are still on the out, and you just see them both, like power walking down the corridor towards each other. They stop, look each other in the eyes, and just like, truce, and then they just turn back and step together and keep going. Just we haven't sorted out our own problems, but our friends needs our help, so we're gonna put that to the side for now. And again, Haida, he tries to sort of help out getting them together, not in a manipulative like, if I can break them up, then next Retsuko will be with me sort of thing, but just in again, like she is my friend, I care about her, I want her to be happy, so I'm gonna do what I can to help with that. But yeah, other than that, I can't really think of too much to say about their relationship. It was, to me at least, not really the most compelling part of the show. Maybe because like dating a tech billionaire is just not really that down to earth. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but
I think it's like as an audience member, you're rooting for Retsuko's happiness. You're rooting for her in love, and I think the other side of that, though, is when you realize that the person that she's with isn't really right for her. She's not going to get all the things she wants out of this relationship. And you as an audience member know that, and you're with the other characters who are telling her that. But, the tension and the struggle, the drama is in her coming to that realization.
Yeah, I
was brokenhearted for her. It felt bad to see her realize that this. I have seen the subject of marriage and kids break up more relationships than anything else. Mm-hmm. I have definitely seen people who They liked each other. They liked each other's bodies. They enjoyed hanging out with each other. But one wanted kids and the other one didn't, and it was a non-negotiable. And so they just, you just got to break up. That's what happens.
It's better than the alternative. You don't want to be raised in a family with someone who doesn't want to raise a family.
Right. No, exactly. In one case, one of my friends, they just agreed to not have kids. But again, that they made the conscious decision that one person didn't want to and the other person was willing to live with that. Not everybody is. Not everybody should. Sean, your thoughts?
I very much relate to the conflict over the future of a marriage and kids, and two people just being on very opposite pages. I've been different routes with a few relationships. One very specific one, marrying and raising a family was always a centerpiece of our plans. And then I'll just nebulously say a lot of things happened, and I reached the inevitable, somewhat bittersweet conclusion that there was no way we could be happy long-term together with both of us being who we were. There was another one wherein it started out with her telling me I'm not the marrying kind, and then eventually that's starting to turn toward, no, I could see you kind of being the one to change that. I could see myself being with you that way. And for various reasons that didn't work out, and now the relationship that I'm currently in is one in which it started off as, before we met, I was fairly, depending on how you viewed it, resigned or resolved to the idea that I would be a trash parent and I never wanted to have kids. And then came the first time before we started dating when I was called Uncle Sean. And then we started dating, and it at first was going to be just very much take things day by day, play it by ear. And this was 2 years into us knowing each other, and it pretty quickly turned to, no, this is as real as anything either of us has felt. I am 100% committed to being the best stepdad in training I could possibly be. And I could see myself having, a lifetime of adventures together as husband and wife. And, but at the same time, given the fact that we're in a kind of poly relationship, I can also kind of see where Tadano is coming from as well, in terms of the idea of of marriage the way it's often viewed as being, outdated and constraining. I get it. But, they both reach the conclusion that I think any reasonable people would, and that is that in any relationship, it's not all about you. It's never just all about you. And there's the distinct possibility that what you want, if you decide to see things through to the kind of forever ending, it may end up making someone else miserable for the rest of their life if what you want is not who they are. It doesn't mean that you don't love them. It doesn't mean that you don't care about them. It doesn't mean that you don't think the world of them as a person. It means you acknowledge, I wouldn't be right for you and you wouldn't be right for me, and this would just lead to years of us being unhappy as opposed to being with somebody else who may not be either of us, but who might also be able to provide something that each of us can't provide the other. And that's ultimately, kind of worth taking the hit in the short term. So that one really hits home for me. And I especially was grateful to see the way that Retsuko's friends rallied around her, as you said, especially Haida, because that's a place that I've certainly been in too, and I can recognize how difficult that must have been for him. But at the same time, he's all the more commendable a character for recognizing the right thing and just running with it.
Okay. Here's my final word on both seasons. I loved season 2. Season 1 was fine. I definitely laughed, especially when she would do karaoke. I laughed a lot. I want to thank David for pitching it to me. Yeah, this is not in my wheelhouse. It's not something I would have watched on my own, or even watched as a recommendation unless we were going to podcast about it. So that's the trick, everyone. If you want me to watch something, you have to talk about it with me. But I actually, despite myself, really ended up enjoying it. Season 2 more so than Season 1. I'm looking forward to Season 3. And when that comes out and we talk about it, I'm looking forward to the comic book. Because I think that'll be fun to talk about, too. So hopefully we'll be able to do that as well. David, your final thoughts on Season 2 and anything else left unsaid?
Yeah, I get, a lot of anime is geared towards a younger audience, no matter what people will tell you that, cartoons are for adults in Japan. No, most of them are for, elementary through high school kids. There's a reason why most anime take place in high school.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine, is what it is. So it is refreshing when you get those shows that do appeal to more of a older audience, because again, there's so much more life happening than just in school or being transported to another dimension. I cannot wait till this fad passes. But yeah, and not only that, something that actually does take a more serious, nuanced, mature look at being an adult. We've shown that Retsuko's been in 2 relationships, both of which have ended. She didn't get the guy, or the guy didn't get the girl, and that's life. I think all of us here, we've had a lot more painful, disaster breakups than we have had successful long-term relationships, and that's life. You don't just meet that special person all of a sudden and boom, you're done. For a lot of us, it's a long, hard road, but totally worth it in the end. And and that's just kind of life. You don't always succeed. You don't always get you don't always win the big game or become super successful. But you still get places. And so something that kind of shows that is kind of special. And even though it's done with cute little furry animals, it's behind all of that is an actual very sort of serious, mature, relatable look at at life. And for me as well, as I said, I lived in Japan for 7 years. It's a very important and special time of my life. It wasn't always good. That there were some bad moments there, but there are anywhere, and it's kind of nice to have something that sort of takes me back to that time, and something that gives me an opportunity to reflect upon it. And as much as I've tried here to be as fair as possible from my outsider perspective, and to any Japanese listeners out there, I'd just like to say, gomen nasai, boku wa ganbatta. I tried my best here, guys. but I don't know everything about it, and I don't want to pretend that I am. And so it was just something I really wanted to sort of talk about and sort of share some of these observations about the show. And I'm looking forward to more. And it's just kind of nice to have something not too serious, but still somewhat relatable to watch.
Yeah, it ain't The Wire, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Mark it on your bingo cards, everybody. Sean, take me home, Daddy-O.
We should work on a crossover.
Well, David, it was a distinct pleasure getting to meet you, and I hope that my awkward ignorance hasn't put you off wanting to do any more podcasts with me in the future, because I'd certainly love to be on with you anytime you've got something you want to talk about.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. but this is one of the most humanly satisfying shows about anthropomorphic office stiffs that you are ever bound to find. It is a sweet, sometimes even...
Mark, you still there?
You okay,
Yeah,
Mark?
I muted my mic. You guys heard that?
Yes.
Yeah, it did
Damn
come
it.
through.
Oh,
Are-
yeah.
Are your insides still inside and outside still outside?
I swear to God, I thought muting that you guys wouldn't hear it. Damn it. All right, go ahead.
It's okay, man. It's okay.
Yeah,
Anyway.
catches a bitch, everyone.
Yeah. It is endearing. It's deeply satisfying. It's funny. It manages to even be kind of quotable. Each season is only about 10 episodes. You could easily, especially with our state of isolation right now, get through it in like one full lazy day.
Don't forget the Christmas special.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And the Christmas special. I don't think there is a bad time of year to watch that Christmas special. It is that good. I am on pins and needles waiting for season 3. Depending on how it goes, I certainly hope it gets renewed for a season 4, although Netflix seems to not be letting a lot of its shows have those long BoJack Horseman or Orange is the New Black lifespans anymore. But I hope that Netflix gives them whatever time they're going to need, be it one more season or another 2 or 3, to bring these characters to a satisfying conclusion, because this has been absolutely worth it.
All right, tomorrow on the Metal Hammer of Doom, Jesse Starcher is back. Yay! We will be reviewing Titans of Creation by Testament. And then on Thursday, myself and Pat Mullen will be reviewing the Netflix single-camera sitcom comedy, The Big Show Show. This is a lot of fun. Definitely in the vein of like Fuller House, that sort of thing. If you enjoyed David tonight, he will be back a week from tonight to discuss, along with Andrew Graham, Star Trek Picard, which we've mentioned a few times. Robert Winfrey will be on to discuss Nightwish, Human Nature, and then Jesse will be back, and then he has to go back to overtime. Boo, Jesse. Boo, Ohio. But Jesse is going to take a brief respite from trying to help the people of Ohio to discuss Ozark Season 3 with me. That's a week from Thursday. Last week, myself and the Podsman reviewed WrestleMania 36, and myself and Alexis Haina debuted a new show, Comic Stripped, in which we talked about the book and the VOD movie Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those are my plugs. David, I don't think you're doing any other podcasts. I think maybe you got something in the works, right? The Star Trek thing?
Yeah. I mean, life was stabilizing, and now it's not stable anymore. But depending on how things go, might have a lot of time next month. So, I need to get started planning that Star Trek retrospective and see how many people we can get in. Yeah, otherwise, I'll review things as they eventually decide on when their release dates are. Who knows? Maybe Gambit will show up.
All right. Sean, go ahead and tell them about your Twitch. And then tell them about your gaming.
Can do. My Twitch channel is twitch.tv/Comer Codex, COMERCODEX. My schedule is in a bit of flux right now. Depending on the day, I stream either from 10 a.m. Central Time to 1 p.m. or 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. You'll find a pretty good variety of games on there. I tend to specialize in PvP, especially shooters, particularly a nice mix of Overwatch, Apex Legends, and Rainbow Six Siege, but lately I have been injecting a lot more single-player games, starting with Wolfenstein The New Order, and now I've started a full franchise run through Kingdom Hearts. The best way to keep track of when I'm going to be streaming is going to be to follow me either on Twitch at my channel and or on Twitter at Comer Codex, and make sure to hit the notification icon so that you will get the ping when I decide to go live. And speaking of which, this is a good time to announce that myself and another friend from our Canadian office, Andrew Graham, are working on something that has long been something that I've been considering since I've never seen a whole lot of gaming content among our slew of shows. And gaming is right up there alongside music as arguably my biggest nerdy passions. Music and professional wrestling, I would say, would be the triumvirate. And that is, we are putting together Long Road to Ruin Gaming Edition. We are going to go through our favorite gaming franchises, one game per episode at a time, and just kind of recount the arcs of quality and evolution of some of our favorite games ever. And in fact, we are starting with 3 that I absolutely adore, and a few games that I believe Andrew will soon be playing for the first time, and that is the BioShock trilogy. So look for that probably within the next couple of months. I'm in the process of playing through the first BioShock game, and when that is done, we're not putting ourselves on a set schedule. We are just saying the episodes will happen when they happen, because some of these games will take longer than others to get a satisfying playthrough. Because, I mean, folks, let's face it, we're adults with families and other responsibilities. If you think for a second that one of us is going to be able to get through The Witcher 3 in the time it takes us to get through Batman Arkham Asylum or BioShock or the first Metal Gear Solid, you are out of your goddamn gourd. It's not happening. You know, the episodes are done when they're done. We'll announce them when they're ready, so that's all the more reason to follow us on Twitter. So that way, you know when to tune in.
All right, I want to thank Sean and David for joining me tonight.
Oh, just one more thing here. So Sean, just quick. Like, does anyone want to make a bet on which will end first? You're playing through Kingdom Hearts or the coronavirus isolation?
Oh my god, dude, the coronavirus isolation, easily.
All right.
Okay, I'm good now.
Because I'm not going full completionist with each of these games. But number one, I'm going to be completing them about as thoroughly as reasonably possible. But also, god damn, there's just so many games in this series.
All right, for Sean and David, you guys can continue this conversation elsewhere, for God's sake. I got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I still go to work.
Hey, so do I.
Outside of the house.
So do I.
All right, so once again, third time. For Sean and David, I greatly appreciate you both talking the show with me. We'll be back for Season 3 later this year, hopefully. Until then, thank you for joining us on a TV party tonight. Be well, be safe, and behave.
Bye, everybody.